Hey everyone, welcome to Nerdium, the podcast made by nerds, for nerds, and in most likely the golden age of nerds. I'm your host, Matt, and to my right, the Chewbacca to my Han, Cary. This week's episode was one suggested by the fans and delves into the highly controversial and quite often personally opinionated topic of movies that are better than the source material. In today's movie industry, studios are quick to pump out as much content as they can. The soul of the source material that's made it so great gets lost. This episode shines a light on ones that we feel took the source material and made something great. So with no further delay, Cary, pop in the VHS and let's start a fire. This week in Nerd News, Star Trek Discovery has officially wrapped its premiere season. The series boldly took us to places Star Trek never took us before, and despite some saying it's not really Star Trek, it's received high ratings and strong praise. Black Panther is now in theaters. After months of hype and discussion of its crushing its opening weekend, should be interesting to see how well it actually does and sets up for an Infinity War. After the exciting run of DC's Dark Knight's Metal, Scott Snyder has been confirmed on the next upcoming Justice League series, Justice League No Justice. That does it for Nerd News. Now let's get to the discussion. Alright, so this podcast topic's brought to you by the Geeks of the Week, the guys at 30-something podcast. They chose the topic of movies that are better than the source material.
Which is a fine topic.
Yeah, especially these days when studios are now rushing to get content out. Sometimes it kind of loses part of the soul that made it so great in the source material.
Well, it's also rare that everybody ever brags about the movie being better than the book.
Yeah.
I know one of my favorite pedantic phrases is, "Oh, but the book was always so much better." It's the equivalent of, you don't really know the band unless you heard them play in the garage back in the day. So it really drives me nuts, but it's always a good refresher to see the other side of that coin.
Yeah. All right, so I'll kick it off with my first choice. My first choice is a movie that I actually remember seeing in theaters. I was quite young at the time. It's Jurassic Park, originally written by Michael Crichton and directed by Spielberg.
And I can hear like 1,000 people screaming at the top of their lungs that the book was better than the movie.
The book was quite well done, but I think just for the genre of a dinosaur kind of theme, it's something you have to kind of visually see. Like, imagining dinosaurs, pretty good. No matter how good your imagination is, doesn't add up to the dinosaurs you saw on screen that Spielberg put out.
Well, I was always a big dinosaur nerd to begin with in school. I could care less about cars. Dinosaurs was where it was at for me. So it was better to see it. And even when I remember reading the book when I was a little kid, I had a hard time just visualizing everything. I mean, you get a general idea, but you never got the raw visual that you got with the movie.
Yeah, the movie made it more tangible, kind of made the stakes real. Mm-hmm. So you're able to kind of identify, more relate to the characters in the movie, I feel.
It was also the first time anything was done like that to that scale. Mm-hmm. Like, I remember when that first came out, just people, I even remember seeing it in the theater. It was one of those big theaters that my grandparents took me to in Toronto because it was a movie you had to see it was long before IMAX. And I remember seeing it for the first time and just being blown away. It was probably the first movie I saw multiple times in the theater just because I was just in awe of everything that was going on.
Mm-hmm. It was perfect because it wasn't CG, it was the animatronic dinosaurs, so...
Exactly. It kind of harkens back to our first episode where we were talking about CG versus like a real physical medium for the actors to interact with. Mm-hmm. And it was just one of the first movies that did it just insanely well to the scale that it was done. It wasn't just a monster. It wasn't one or two critters running around. It was dinosaur after dinosaur after dinosaur. And it was done just insanely well.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. That's all I really have for that one.
So one off of my list would have been 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
And I saw the movie long before I read the book because no child in their right mind is going to read or understand 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
The way Stanley Kubrick kind of handled everything. If you read the book is very... It delves deep into the science of the fiction. Like, it is a science book through and through. You know, the research has been done, and it can be if you're not ready for it, a really, really long read. And I mean drawn out. But with the movie, you got that excellent medium. And also with the movie, you got these long periods of dead silence. You felt like you were in space. I remember watching the movie at a little bit of an older age and getting just tense during the silence. And whenever I was reading a book, you never really got the gravity of the situation. It was, oh, okay, he does this, and then this happens, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. But while you watch the movie, and I would strongly recommend anybody to go back and watch the movie, just get involved in the silence when everything's going on, when he's outside of the ship and he's trying to get back in, and just, there can't be any sound in space.
Yeah.
I mean, we all like our science fiction shows with the lasers firing off and the explosions. I mean, I'm a sucker for it. I love it. But when all that sound is completely removed and all you can hear is maybe a breather, and that's it. And even then, they take that away when he's inside the shuttle. It creates a level of tension that I never ever felt with the books.
Yeah.
Like there were some tense moments in the books, and the books are definitely worth a read. But if you really want to experience 2001: A Space Odyssey, you got to see the movie.
Yeah.
That and just the mind-bending psychedelic visuals near the end are well worth a watch. If you've never seen anything like that before, just make sure you're not standing in front of the TV.
Yeah, watched that first time when I was quite young, and just kind of warped my mind. Watched it again when I was a little bit older, and made a little bit more sense. Mm-hmm. It was more enjoyable. As to your point there with the silence in space, just a little kind of sidebar. The 2009 Star Trek did a really good job with that. Beginning with the Kelvin.
Yeah.
When you see part of the hull blow out and people get sucked out and go quiet.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. But that was just a little sidebar.
No, absolutely. And that scene was, I remember seeing that scene and going, oh, shit, like, that's tense.
Yeah.
And there is something to be said when you cut off all sound. Mm-hmm. Like, and especially in space where there can't be any sound. I remember one of the tagline to the Alien movie was, in space, nobody can hear you scream. Well,
yeah.
All the time that they're out in space or whatever, there's all kinds of noise. You know, you never got that there's nothing out there vibe. But this is a movie when he's trying to get back into the ship and Hal's not letting him back in there. That just dead silence. Yeah. There's no silence until he gets in there and gets back into the atmosphere and everything like that. That's fine. You hear everything again, but you go for minutes, and they're very, very long minutes. So for my money, that is one of the best out there.
Yeah, Kubrick always does a pretty good movie.
I think so for the most part.
Yeah. My next choice is Blade Runner, which was originally Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. It was directed by Ridley Scott. Philip K. Dick has done a lot of books that kind of delve into the same kind of area of what it is to be human, that have been adapted to the movie of Blade Runner. It's been adapted to the series Electric Dreams on the Space Network.
Space has it. I always see the advertisements for it, and it's on that list of the second I have a second to watch them.
Yeah.
Either from the star power that show brings, because it's done in like an anthology, isn't it? Like every episode is a different story.
I don't know much about it. I've also been the same where it's like I have so much on my plate right now of shows I want to watch. That one's going to maybe be in the off season where in the summer I might pick it up.
And I find that he does a lot of that raw emotion work, and that was it's a movie. I remember when I saw it as a kid. My grandparents had to warn me that it was a dark movie, like visually dark movie, not.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of light in that movie.
You know, it's also a very, very quiet movie at times. Like it's not a movie that you can really watch once and take everything in. Like there is a lot of nuance to that movie that just similar to 2001 requires multiple viewings. And
it's kind of a movie where something happens and then it gives you some time to kind of process with the silence. Some stuff that's happening on the screen. It's a loose adaptation to the book, and Ridley Scott really kind of pulls off that dark, kind of gritty Ridley Scott vibe that he always brings to movies like an Alien. He kind of holds kind of a dark mirror to humanity with that movie, with kind of what the future could be like, where it's kind of smoggy and dirty and overcrowded.
basically the road that we're all joyfully walking down right now.
Yeah. But it's really well done. The characters they're interesting to watch as they develop. One thing that Ridley Scott does in the movie that's not quite in the book is where he does kind of tease, is Decker a replicant?
I've enjoyed multiple times, and you can find, it seems, countless videos on YouTube, theories and ideas and fan theories all about how, is Decker a replicant, yes or no, and here's how, and if you look at this scene, you see this, if you look at this scene, you see that. And I always I say always, sometimes it pisses me off, but I always like a movie that's almost open to interpretation.
Yeah.
I like being able to become so invested that I'm not sure. The Thing does it really well too there when they did the reboot, which is almost like a prequel sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it was, at the very end you have the last two survivors, and it's like, man, one of them is the alien.
Yep.
And there's a dozen fan theories about that too, but the first time I saw something like that pop up was with Blade Runner.
Yep. And even with Blade Runner 2049, they don't really explain it still. Like, they don't touch it. They still leave it open. Like, you're like, could Deckard be a replicant still? Like, you don't know, because he was able to reproduce with one.
Yeah.
So does that mean he's a human, or does that mean he's a replicant that can reproduce with another replicant?
Yeah, exactly. I like a movie that draws a lot of questions. It brings you into that world, and Ridley Scott's universe is a really, really in-depth one. Like, it wasn't, here's a set piece for the purpose of having a set piece. Everything from the set to the actors to the way everything just kind of meshed together. It was just done insanely well.
Yeah, it was a really good futuristic kind of sci-fi, but also at the same time old kind of detective movie where it was like that noir movie where you have the femme fatale. And,
very, 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 very noir-esque, but also really, really gritty all at the same time. I know I got right involved into it.
Yeah.
So next on my list, and it could be debatable if you're into this kind of thing, was The Godfather.
Okay.
Which Mario Puzo's book is a great read. I prefer the movie myself. A lot of critics kind of prefer the movie. The book gives you more backstory to some of the other characters. In the movie, Luca Brasi, you only see him a couple of times at his daughter's wedding, and then he just kind of disappears when he gets killed. You go into the backstory more of the capos and the sub bosses and everything like that, and it's great. I really, really enjoyed it. The movie really doesn't go into to the reason why Alan Neary has a police uniform that everybody buys. It's not a fake uniform. They explain what happened to him as a police officer, how he got involved with The Godfather. Some of the backstory of Tessio and Clemenza, parts from The Godfather 2 are very much established in the book. Like, there is a blend. Godfather 1 and 2, you could probably say, are the two movies that encapsulate the book. What the book can't really deliver is the raw, gritty, no-nonsense business of being a crime boss. The death, the blood, the destruction, the chaos it wreaks on a family. The book does a good job at belaying the emotions, but to actually see it on screen, to see those mob hits on screen, really, really hits hard. It doesn't glamorize anything. Nobody looks at the Godfather movies and go, gee, I really wish I was like Sonny Corleone. No, not too, or I mean, they're very, well, might be, I don't know too many people that want to get mowed down, but that's to each their own.
Yeah.
But for me, the Godfather movie the first two, let me specify, Godfather movies delivered an excellent story. We don't talk about the third because that movie should never have happened. But for my money, when it comes to the Godfather, if you have the time to read the book, you could enjoy the book and really get into it. It is a good crime drama, but you could save yourself a lot of time and get just as much out of the first two movies.
Okay. Yeah, I guess a big kind of recurring theme with books over the movies is the books are good at kind of giving you an idea of what's going on internally with the characters and connecting with the emotion. But the movies are good for getting the visuals across and the impact of the imagery a little bit better. So, that being said, my next choice is The Shining by Stephen King, and directed by Stanley Kubrick, another Kubrick.
Mm-hmm. And this is a debatable choice because a lot of people,
it is debatable, yeah,
including Stephen King, were not too big a fan on The Shining by Kubrick.
Especially Stephen King. But that being said, there's a lot of people out there that enjoy a good Stephen King book, but then there's a lot of people that don't, just because they don't like his style of writing and his style of storytelling.
Stephen King and I had a falling out when I was done reading the Dark Tower series. We haven't gotten along very well since then.
Well, the movie's okay.
Well, the movie's just based off of one book. I read the whole I invested a lifetime into his series. It did not end the way a book should end. I was very passionate about the ending of that book.
Yeah. Well, before I delve into The Shining here, I'll kind of just touch on a few of the other Stephen King movies that are from his books, like Cary, even Dreamcatcher, which was one of his more recent ones in the last about 10 years. Dreamcatcher as a book was amazing. The movie fell really short.
I felt the same way about it.
It wasn't too bad. I enjoyed it for just it being it.
Now when you say it being it, are you talking about Tim Curry or are you talking about the latest
I'm talking about the latest it.
Okay, I haven't seen the latest it.
Oh, the latest it was pretty well done.
Yeah.
The Tim Curry one, I remember Tim Curry from Rocky Horror Picture Show and from Home Alone 2. So those being my first movies seeing Tim Curry and then seeing him as it, could not.
Fair enough.
So
fair enough.
Especially after Rocky Horror Picture Show, I was like, that's him. So can't be too scared right now.
Yeah, that's true. I felt the same way about Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice, but
yeah,
fair enough.
That's valid too. But back to The Shining. So it's less of a supernatural thriller than the book was. It's more of a psychological thriller, which I think made it more palatable for a wider audience. It also appealed to Stephen King's diehard fans, but kind of brought it to a bunch of other people that didn't necessarily get on board with the whole supernatural stuff. They liked a good slasher movie or just a good horror movie. It's just something that was like more a psychological film. There was quite a bit of differences in the movie.
Huge differences, yeah.
But it kind of still went along the same parallels as the book with those differences.
I remember watching The Shining as a kid, and I couldn't understand it for the life of me. By the time Jack goes crazy, I was like, okay, I get that. He's crazy now. Fantastic. A lot of the nuance, a lot of the visual nuances as well, just were, a lot of stuff like that can be lost on a kid. Subtlety, subtle humor, subtle hints, winks at the camera, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. At a certain age, you're just not going to see them.
Yeah.
Truth be told, you could say the same thing about certain Pixar movies. There are certain winks at the camera for the adults.
Yeah.
Way more for the kids. But The Shining is definitely, no stranger to that. From where I stand, I've read The Shining. Mm-hmm. I've seen the movie, and I saw the Stephen King's The Shining on network television years ago when it was issued.
Yeah.
For my money, I like the Jack Nicholson version, partially because I really like Jack Nicholson, but also it was far more of a psychological thriller. It wasn't your typical hooly-gooly, blah, 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 jump at the camera scares. It was really in your mind how a lot of that stuff worked. You really didn't know, is the hotel haunted? Is Jack really just hallucinating it all? Is he just coming under the cabin fever pressure? What's really going on here? For where I stand on it, that's what I like the most about Kubrick. That, and I'm a big Kubrick fan. So again, with my biases just bleeding through all of my statements, I prefer the Shining movie over the book and the weird miniseries that was on TV.
Yeah, no, it's just something, again, with the imagery, seeing the actual stuff on screen, like the blood coming out of the elevator, all that. And it's just, there did a couple changes, but I don't think it necessarily took away from Stephen King's work in the book. It just made something kind of different. That being said, also, I saw it the first time when I was quite young, and it's almost like two different movies for when you're at different ages. Mm-hmm. When you're young, you don't understand the whole psychological stuff, so it kind of seems like it's a supernatural movie for a while. Like you're thinking that these things are actually happening. And then when you're a little bit older, you're kind of like understanding more of the psychological aspect. You're a little bit more mature. You're kind of like, is he going crazy right now, or is it back to being the ghost stuff? Yeah. So it's almost watching it at two different points in your life and getting almost two different movies.
There's a bunch of documentaries on The Shining as to how it was filmed and what the actors went through. I would recommend almost any of them. I'm not really a big fan of the Stanley Kubrick directed the moon landing and this is his big confession piece documentary. Although entertaining to watch, I just don't buy into it. But if you ever watch any of these documentaries, and they, especially with a lot of the visual cues you may not have picked up on, it really kind of highlights the mirror work that he did, the symmetry that goes on with the way people are standing around and doing stuff like that. It's really, really interesting. It's you could dig down deep into that movie with documentaries and backstories and really watch it again after you watch all that. And it's another layer. It's another layer to go through. Mm-hmm. It's another movie altogether. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. It's good choice on that one.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where it takes the source material and just makes something kind of new with it, but also respects the source material.
Yeah, I don't. I know Stephen King was really not a fan, but I guess as an author, if you look at your work and you see that it's been changed too much to your tastes, I could see where that might kind of set you off. Or, you know, if I create something and then I hand it to you and then you take it and turn it into not necessarily something completely different, but maybe you've altered it where, as far as me as the creator sees, it's just a shadow of what it used to be. Yeah, I could see where that might gnaw at his mind, you know, but it is still one of the classic horror movies out there that every Halloween you would be hard pressed to miss it. Like you would be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't catch it at least once.
Yeah, it's definitely an iconic classic. So.
Oh, exactly. It how many times in pop culture reference does it pop up? It pops up all over the place. Yeah. You know, it is hard to escape it without somebody borrowing it, even if to only use it as a campy joke. It is permeated the zeitgeist of society. It's in there. Yep. So my one of my last ones before I kind of throw myself under the bus there is Shawshank Redemption, and it was based off of the short story Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King. So another fantastic Stephen King movie. This was by far one of my number one prison movies for ages and ages. I like the story. I like the characters. I like the acting. It was all really, really good. But I read the book, and I remember just reading the story as you follow Andy Dufresne and Red's telling the story and all this sort of jazz. For me, when you read the book, you get the story, and yeah, sure, just like all movies based on books, there's pieces missing here and there. Mm-hmm. I think the overall book was encapsulated well in the movie, but the way Tim Robbins plays Andy Dufresne, not only does he come across as isolated from the prison, you almost see him as an audience member locked away from you, like he's in his own world completely. Mm-hmm. I remember watching the movie and thinking, I can't really attach myself to this character.
Yeah, he doesn't really open up.
He doesn't. He's locked away. He's all you really know is that it was a setup job, and that's it. Yeah. And he doesn't open up to you as the audience member. He doesn't open up to the people in the prison. He kind of develops that friendship with Red, and that's about as far as you get. You really don't get to have. You get more emotionally attached to Red than you do Andy Dufresne. Yep. And for me, that always stuck out. Like, how many movies do you watch where, you know, they go out of their way to make you emotionally invested in the protagonist, or hell, even sometimes the antagonist? Yeah. You know, you have that emotional connection with your main character. During the Shawshank Redemption, you're isolated from that. Yep. He's locked himself away from you. He's locked himself away from the prison. And the book does a job at mentioning that. But as you read the book, whether you read books as the fly on the wall, whether you put yourself in the shoes of the protagonist or the antagonist, you get emotionally attached. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people do that with books. I mean, reading a book is an emotional investment. It's a time investment. I remember I'd love to have the time to read like I used to have the time to read. But unfortunately I don't, because my son insists that I don't. That being said, I remember reading this story, and I was emotionally attached to everybody in there. It was a good story. Seeing it on the screen, I quickly understood that this man wants nothing to do with me as an audience member, just like he doesn't want anything to do with the prison itself.
Yeah, it's I haven't read the book, but I've seen the movie numerous times, and I enjoy the movie. It's kind of a movie that's a slow burn. It's not a quick paced movie.
You're not watching it for quick gratification by any stretch of the imagination. It's not a nice story for a good 80% of it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
I mean, he does not have a good time while he is in prison.
Nope.
You know, and even in the book, and especially in the movie, they has a James Caan that plays the one of the ladies that always corner him in the laundry room.
I don't remember now.
No, neither do I. Not off the top of my head, anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's so much of that story is based off of him just trying to get a foot forward and then being pushed 3 steps back. It's not, and there's countless movies that do this where it's just not a particularly pleasant story.
Yeah.
Until the very end, in which case it kind of all pays off. But that being said, it's probably one of my favorite movies out there, and even still to this day. If it's on TV or on Netflix or whatever, I'll put it on just because it is a very pleasant movie to watch.
It's one of those movies that you can kind of have on in the background too, and you've seen it so many times you can go away from it and come back and you know what's going on. So.
And still very much enjoy it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that will wrap up our conversation about movies that are better than the source material. We won't even get into Steve's picks because he picked Twilight, so he's not allowed near the mic right now.
No, he's not allowed out of the box.
Yeah, so stay in your corner, Steve, and that will wrap up for this week's episode, and see you next week.
Take care, everybody.
And that concludes this episode of Nerdium. I hope you all had a good time. As always, you can look for us on Twitter at Nerdium Podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Let us know what you'd like us to cover. Give us a shout and tell us what you'd like to hear us carry on about, argue about, or discuss. Feel free to message us or drop us a line at nerdiumpodcast@gmail.com. And if you've liked what you've heard today and have a few moments, give us a quick rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your nerdy friends and family all about us. Until next time.